Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to do a full review for Iron Hammer, the new Infinity Warps character that's free to play and that is getting a lot of attention, and rightfully so, because of how awesome he is. We're going to start him out in World or Extreme Alliance battle so you guys can get a feel for why I like the character so much, but it's a combination of the flash and the utility. The heal, the charge beam that you can kind of wind up, the iframes, and the look that's part Iron Man, part Thor. And while I did kind of mock these characters, or at least their design in principle, in practice, as you can see, they kick a lot of ass. And with this character, I've been able to ring out about 350 to 390 score with his leadership and Thor and... I got blinded there. With Thor and Nova as strikers. Now, of course, Tier 3 Thor as a striker is definitely going to give me a higher score than other characters potentially could, but you'll still be able to get a decent score with him. Definitely way over 100,000. Probably even at Tier 1 he's able to get those scores, and even when I make mistakes, he can make up for them quite quickly. He's got the heal going on, and I'm actually skipping his second skill because it has too many hits, but otherwise I could be using his second skill for an additional iframe that offers some AoE damage. Now, as far as the rotation that I'm using this time around, I had to actually goof it up there and I lost my proc, but I'm using the fifth skill immediately canceled into the fourth skill. The fourth skill does the vast majority of his damage, and my proc is kind of off right now, but I'll get it back in just a second here. And we want all the damage to stack on the fourth skill because, as you can see, it lasts almost the whole time that the proc is up. We use the third skill at the end there because it's a good way to clear the last few mobs, and it also deals some damage. And then if we're in really big trouble because we're going to get hit, we can use the first skill iframe. The first skill iframe is good because it doesn't do many hits, so it's probably not going to trigger your damage proc. These rotation suggestions are almost exclusively for Extreme Alliance battle. If you're playing World Boss, of course, you know, use the second skill. It's got a long iframe. It's very, very good for Infinity Thanos and things like that. But for Extreme Alliance battle, where you want to prioritize burst damage in specific timings, the second skill hurts you a lot more than the first skill. And you can see the first skill is really nice for just kind of resetting yourself. But you want to cancel 5 immediately into 4. That's where all the gravy comes from. And then if you want to do, you can do 3. But honestly, you can actually just do 5 and 4. And you can still get a respectable score as long as you can score or time yourself well. And I actually got hit there at the end. I shouldn't have gotten hit. I'm actually going to take some damage there too. Another thing that I noticed, and we're on the verge of dying. Let's see if we can keep him alive here. Another thing that I noticed is that his immunity on his fourth skill doesn't trigger right away. It actually takes about a second or two. Not 2 seconds, but it takes about half a second to a second to actually activate. So if you do not have high attack speed, and that's 369, which is what I ballparked him at. If you don't have high attack speed, or if something is going to get in your way, you will have to kind of take that into consideration. It's not immediately triggered for the immunity on Hammer Beam, so that's why I use the fifth skill sometimes, and I let it linger a little bit longer than just the initial 5 cancel immediately into 4 if I think I'm about to get hit, i.e. the Frost Beast is about to lunge at me. But 5 canceling into 4 is a great start for your damage proc and your activation. 3 is awesome as well to keep the HP up and to do a little bit of damage. And then we were using 1 for the iframe. 2 also has an iframe. So he's rocking in total 3 iframes and 1 long 4-second immunity with his 4th skill, which just makes him so easy to keep alive. You combo that with his very high base movement speed, and you didn't get to see too much of it there against the Frost Beast because the arena is very small, but try him out against any of the world bosses and he runs circles around them. He's very, very quick. As far as my build goes and what you can expect with a similar build, if you get your character to tier 2, because I already have mine at tier 2, just regular level 60, I'm halfway through his potential. I've got 4-star Uru. I added on some crit damage and crit rate, but only 2 of each, and it's kind of mixed. His stats on the details page, I'm just under the cap for both ignore defense and remove cooldown. and then I've got 42% crit rate and almost 170 crit damage. So the 170 is kind of like my soft cap if I'm imagining that I'll be able to roll an obelisk, a better obelisk later that has about 30% crit damage, because that's about the average. The attack speed is a little bit low. I would like it to be higher, but I think he would need a uniform or very specialized Uru in order to get closer to that cap, or more attack speed on cards, which is not something I have. His fourth gear, I had to roll to ignore defense because he doesn't have ignore defense as any of his base stats. Because he doesn't have ignore defense, but he does have skill cooldown, that does rule out Hawk's Eye as a preferred set, while Hawk's Eye does have the advantage of the HP Uru or the HP ISO 8. It doesn't work very well because he'll have too much cooldown. So you want to go for Power of Angry Hulk or Overdrive. Those both have ignore defense. Those both have offensive sets. There really isn't anything else that I could recommend too successfully for him. You could possibly go with something like Binary Power because the recovery rate and max HP synergize with his heal, but honestly his heal is not that great. It's only 5%. You get to trigger it every 5 seconds, but even 5% every 5 seconds is really just 1% every second. And you wouldn't really build a character around that. It's not enough to keep them alive, and he does a better job of keeping himself alive by either killing his enemies or using his iframes and his immunity. As far as his obelisk goes, this could definitely be better, but it's not bad. It's almost a 40% lightning damage, which is cap, and a 120 proc. Now the mine damage is obviously useless. I would much prefer double lightning damage. I think double lightning damage proc is the beauty kind of holy grail obelisk for this character, for Iron Hammer. You could also go double lightning damage invincibility. You don't necessarily need to give him guard break immunity because he has super armor, but if you intend to fight him against a lot of characters with native penetration like Quicksilver and Cable and Scarlet Witch, then he will need guard break immunity. But otherwise, double lightning and another, good proc, either of damage or of invincibility, is really going to shred your enemies. Secondarily, you could go for something like lightning damage and crit damage, or lightning damage and crit rate. But either way, you can't really go wrong with a build like that. And he even does really well as his own leadership. And I was testing him out with Thor, who I usually use for Extreme Alliance Battle, and I usually use him with Medusa's leadership. And that was one of the selling points that I originally discussed with you guys about Medusa, is that her new uniform ups her leadership to 42%, which is 6% more than the 36% that it was originally at for the normal outfit. And everyone thought that that was going to make her, she was already the preferred leadership for Thor, but then here comes along Iron Hammer, and even though 15% doesn't seem like a lot, it helps a lot. And especially for those of you that don't have double lightning damage on your Thor, I would strongly consider trying out, just testing out a tier 1 Iron Hammer as your leadership for Thor for Extreme Alliance Battle if you still have time now before the daily reset. I myself only have a 30% lightning damage obelisk, and I think the extra 15% makes Iron Hammer almost as good as Medusa, and my scores were eerily similar. I was scoring about just under 1.15 with Medusa, 1,001,500,000, and I was getting about 1.09 million points using Iron Hammer's leadership. The only disadvantage to using Iron Hammer's leadership instead of Medusa is the team up skill. In the case of Thor and Medusa, the team up ability, let's go find Thor here, the team up ability gives him his 5th skill, whereas with Medusa it gives him his 4th skill, which, so you can see here with Iron Hammer he does his 4th skill, Raging Storm, which is not as good as with Medusa, where he uses his 5th skill, Force of the Thunder God. That's where you get the huge juicy damage, you get the iframe, you get the 5 seconds of immunity and the shock damage, and he, lights up his armor. But for those of you that have especially an under-geared Thor, if he's still tier 2, if you're still working on your cards, Iron Hammer is just such a good utility character that fits in almost anywhere, and he's surprisingly valuable for something like Extreme Alliance Battle, where we don't expect free-to-play characters to really shine. The last great free-to-play character before Iron Hammer was probably Angel, purely free-to-play, not attached to an epic quest or anything like that, and he was, understandably quite bad at ABX, but he had his value in PvP. Now, I didn't have a chance to test out Iron Hammer in PvP. I don't have the highest hopes for him, but with super armor, with all of these buffs, with heals, with iframes, he could possibly stand a chance. So that's where I will crowdsource some additional information. For those of you that have built up your Iron Hammer a bit more defensively, possibly with an invincibility obelisk, possibly with a defensive ISO 8 set, and you've tried him in PvP, possibly Alliance Conquest, but more likely Timeline Battle, what do you think? Do you think the character lives up to the expectations, and is he as good defensively as he appears to be offensively? Sound off in the comments below. Also, let me know what you think of Iron Hammer, because I'm very impressed with the character. He's very fun to play, and he gives me a lot of vibes of Iron Man, more so than Thor, mostly because I cancel his 5th skill, which is the one that very closely mimics Thor's 5th skill, or even his old 5th skills. But really, Hammer Beam feels a lot like Iron Man to me, and so does High Speed Hammer, where he kind of flies around and sends out a bunch of missiles. So let me know. I want to do some more gameplay of Iron Hammer in the future, especially showing him off against Thanos Infinity World Boss Ultimate, because I think it's amazing that he can take down the Titan with all of the Infinity Stones. Sound off in the comments below about him and what you think. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. Hit the bell if you don't want to miss any of my videos. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.